Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of this new series, which focuses on leading in the middle of uncertainty and change. So, in today's episode, we're going to take a look at what are different problem solving signatures. And I want to start with a story. This story is set in middle India. And one year, the main well that serves the village runs dry. There is water, but there isn't a whole lot of water. And the four wisest people in the village come together to try and solve that problem. The first wise person takes a look at the well and starts thinking about, okay, so what is it that we can do to make sure that there is no leakage of water? Uh, how do we preserve the water that we already have? And how do we ration it so that we don't run out of water too early? Makes sense, right? Uh, the first wise person focuses on how do we use what we have to its best. Then a second wise person comes along and says, why don't we see how other villages have solved this problem? And why just other villages? Why don't we see how towns have solved this problem? After all, there is a water shortage in so many parts of the country. The answer lies somewhere, and we just need to find how others have solved it and bring that solution back to our village. The third wise person says, I think we need to take a look at how we're building the wells itself. Are we building our wells in the right places? Are those the places where the water table is at its best? Are we using the right material? The real answer lies in taking a step back and saying, okay, what is it that we can do to make sure our well never runs dry again? And then finally, the fourth wise person comes and says, are we even looking at the problem correctly? Why are we so focused on the well? What about other things that we can do? What about water harvesting techniques? What about bringing in water from the nearby streams and rivers? So, four people and four very, very different ways of looking at the same problem. This is what we're going to explore today. Hi, Mani Vernon, and hi, Archit. Thank you for joining us. As you listen to the story, start thinking about which matters the most to you in the way you look at problems, because there are four very, very different lenses. And as we're going to explore in today's episode, it not just influences the kind of solution you come up with, that's the most obvious part, but it also influences the kinds of problems that you're most attracted to within your organization. And interestingly enough, the kinds of people you want to work with to solve those problems. So I'm just going to share a small deck to walk us through what those four different styles might look like. Four ways of seeing the same problem. I want you to think back to the story of the well and the four wise people and how each of them represented such a different way of looking at the same problem. So, the first way, which is to look at the well and say, okay, what is it that we can do here to make the well itself stronger, is in a way the optimizer. The optimizer takes a look at a problem, says, what is it that we can do with whatever resources we have here and now and solve that problem. To be honest, optimizers are hugely respected in organizations because they're the people who come in, solve a problem, make sure that tomorrow you have a better solution. And it makes sense why they are so valued within organizations. The second kind is someone who takes a wide angle lens and says, okay, let's take a step back. Let's take a look at the problem and say, what is it that others have done to solve a problem that is very similar to this? Works really, really well when one is stuck. The wide lens, it involves bringing ideas from different organizations, different industries, and sometimes, to be honest, completely different fields. So the recombiner is someone who brings in ideas from one field to the other and starts a very fresh look at the problem that we have. A recombiner is great when we get stuck with the problem. Our existing ways of looking at the problem simply won't work. What are the strengths of a recombiner? someone who's really good at pattern recognition, someone who's really interested in what's happening outside their immediate world, and someone who can bring in these ideas together and influence people to think about the problem perhaps in a completely different way. The third person, who in our story of that well said, let's take a look at whether we're actually digging our wells in the right places, what is the material that we're using for that well, is someone who is an architect, someone who looks at a problem and says, how do we make sure that this problem doesn't repeat itself? It's not just a one-time solution, but how do we prevent this problem from arising ever in the future? And that's someone who uses a blueprint lens, someone who can look at the entire system as a whole and see where different pieces are connecting and how these different connections can be designed much better. What are some of the strengths that someone who is an architect has? Now, obviously, someone who is really good at systems thinking, someone who's really good at thinking about interconnected complex systems, and someone who's really good at understanding what are root causes of a solution. Architects are highly, highly useful when you're looking at a transformation of a system, because a transformation involves many parts that are interconnected and each influences each other. And the fourth kind of problem solving, which is asking whether we're solving the right question in the first place, is the X-ray lens. And what an X-ray lens does is it looks at the problem and tries to understand, okay, so what are the hidden assumptions right here? So in the example that we took about the well that runs dry, you will see that the person who asks whether the solution in fact lies in constructing a better well, or should we start looking at water as a resource which can come from many sources, whether it is water harvesting in this example, or whether it is canals linked to streams in the nearby areas. That's a challenger. The challenger tends to ask, are we solving the right problem in the first place? So what I'm going to ask you to do is, as you hear these four, think about which one of these is you. Are you someone who takes a look at a problem and is called in to solve that problem right there and then? Are you someone who's very curious about how similar problems have been solved elsewhere and is known for being able to bring in solutions from other organizations, other industries? Are you someone who loves to take a step back and says, let's take a look at the system as a whole and make corrections so that the problem that we're facing never arises again? Or are you someone who loves to ask the right questions, sometimes the hard questions around whether we're solving the right problem in the first place? Now, here's something very interesting. Our natural cognitive problem-solving style predisposes us to look for problems of a certain kind. So, for instance, if you're an optimizer or someone who can solve a problem here and now, you gravitate towards and are extremely interested in problems that can be solved by going deeper and deeper and within the same system coming up with a solution, right in the here and now. And you're attracted to those problems. You see your role as being a very practical problem solver, an enabler, someone who's called in whenever there's a crisis. If you're someone who's very interested in bringing in ideas from different parts of the industry or other industries into your own organization, you gravitate towards those problems. You think about, okay, what should we do that's completely different from what we've done so far? What is it that we haven't thought about as yet, but others have already solved for? And you gravitate towards problems of that kind. You look at what can be system-wide changes. You look at what can be novel ideas, adjacent industries or industries even further away from yours. If you're someone who loves to take a look at how a system is interconnected and how you can solve a problem once and for all, if you're that architect, then you gravitate towards problems that are more complex, problems that don't necessarily have a solution right away. But you derive a lot of satisfaction from the fact that You have the capacity to see the system as a whole with its many interconnected parts. And if you solve for that, then the problem doesn't arise in the future. So this is not about solving the here and now. It's about an absolute step jump in what is even possible. Or if you're someone who is a challenger, then you gravitate towards asking questions where you see there are hidden assumptions that nobody else in the organization is willing to question. So each of us has a style, and that style predisposes us to certain kinds of problems, and it also pulls us towards people of a different kind. And this is where, at least for me, it got really, really interesting. Do you know that there's over 30 years of research that shows that people who are, say, optimizers, who are really good at solving a problem in the here and now, and people who like to take a step back and look at the larger system as a whole or a large leap ahead, typically think in such different ways that both groups tend to get impatient with each other. And isn't that interesting? While there's such a complementary set of skills, in fact, they're really hard to work with when they're together. And that's because they're coming at it from such different cognitive frameworks. And I'm sure you've heard of this in the organizations that you're part of. Someone's really good at firefighting, and they're known for that. Someone else is really good at big ticket innovation. Someone else is a challenger and asks the hard question and is sometimes even regarded as difficult within the system. So each of these styles brings in a very specific strength and a specific blind spot. So, that's what I wanted to speak about today. Archit, hi. To your question, my PhD is in organizational behavior. So that's the kind of doctor I am. That's the field I practice in. So with that, we come to an end of today's conversation. Today was episode 4 of this series, which is all about leadership when faced with lots of uncertainty and change around. Episode 1 looked at the conformity trap, and in the conformity trap, we spoke about how very often, just because we like to fit in to the workplace or within our own circle of friends and colleagues, we hesitate to raise questions that would actually lead us to a better future, but might make us temporarily unpopular. So that was the conformity trap. In episode 2, we looked at curiosity and how curiosity works differently in different people. For some people, curiosity means taking a look at many different fields and using ideas from one field in the other, something similar to what we saw in today's problem-solving style. And there are others whose curiosity comes from a sense of discomfort till they get to the bottom of something, like a puzzle. In episode 3, we then took a slightly different turn and looked at chaos theory and how chaos theory can help us understand change in large interconnected systems and how small changes in one part of the system can in fact create massive changes downstream. The Iran war is an example of exactly that. And today's episode 4 of the series, takes a look at our own personal problem-solving signature, whether we're an optimizer, someone who looks at a problem and solves it within the constraints that we have within the system there and then, or are we somebody who's a recombiner, someone who brings in ideas from different fields to take a look at a problem in a completely new way? Or are we someone who is an architect, someone who takes a systems view, a step back, and redesigns the system so that the problem never occurs? Or finally, are we a challenger, someone who can surface hidden assumptions behind the way we've designed the problem itself, so that perhaps we can reach an answer that there was no way we would have reached any other way? So with that, we come to an end of today's conversation. If you find this interesting, follow us. And if you go on my personal LinkedIn page and in the events section, you'll see replays of past episodes. Thanks for joining. Have a great weekend.